Hello and welcome. My name is Pragya Devan and you're watching Voice News Network. Today I'm joined by Dr. Panjwani, who's an assistant professor at the University of Toronto's Department of Psychiatry and consultant psychiatrist at Trillium Health Partners. He's also the president of the Indo-Canadian Psychiatric Association. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today.
Thank you, Pragya. Uh, Thank you, all the staff and executives of VNN, Weekly Voice Network, for inviting me. I guess this is our second session,
Yes,
and I'm happy to be here.
we are happy to have you, sir. Thank you. So, 10th of October this year is World Mental Health Day, and every year WHO celebrates this day. So, what is the message this year?
Well, this year, the message from WHO is mental health care for all. So let's make it a reality. Worldwide, different governments are doing different things to promote awareness and education of on mental health topics, to eradicate the stigma of mental health, and to develop infrastructure. So, at the present, humanity is in the midst of an unfolding global crisis, which is a public health crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. So, the COVID-19 pandemic has a significant impact on people's mental health worldwide. For the people experiencing mental illness, this is an unequal world. Everyone doesn't have access to treatment, stigma still prevails, and different socio-economic and different racial factors come into play. So some groups, including health and other frontline workers, children, students, people living alone, seniors, and those people who have pre-existing mental health conditions have been particularly affected during this pandemic. So the COVID-19 pandemic has had a significant impact on people's mental health worldwide. For the people experiencing mental illness, this is an unequal world and it has to change.
Yes, for sure. And on this, so I wanted to ask this question to you. A report came out today, this morning, by Toronto Foundation. It is called 2021 Vital Signs Report, which warns of alarming increases in mental health challenges for children and youth in the city for the past 2 years because of pandemic. So, what do you think is affecting the mental health in children and teens?
Yes, there are certain groups of people who are more vulnerable to developing mental health issues and problems, and children, youth, students, women, certain minority, indigenous people, seniors, and those who have pre-existing mental health conditions are more prone, more vulnerable. So these are the classes of people we have to focus more.
So, doctor, what steps should we take to achieve the goals which are laid by WHO this year?
Well, first of all, who is responsible? It is the everyone's responsibility. It is our collective responsibility to nurture and invest in mental health initiatives in order to improve the quality of life of people with mental illness. And we can do this through education, equitable and accessible mental health care where everyone has access to it and it is equal, there's no discrimination. We can aim for better livelihoods, create infrastructures which are important, and also create an effective public, private, civil society partnership, a triangular partnership, because everyone has to play a role. To quote the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, real change, enduring change, happens one step at a time. We can see a gradual progress. We have achieved a lot, but there's still a lot to be done.
So, because we are talking about mental health, what is mental health if you can define for us?
Okay, WHO has defined mental health, which is a state of well being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, are able to cope with the normal stresses of life, work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So that's the definition that has been accepted worldwide as defined by WHO.
So, we talk a lot about mental illness. If you can define that as well.
Mental illness is just like any physical illness. It is a disease or a disorder of the brain or the psyche, the mind. There are certain symptoms which are pervasive and affect most areas of a person's life negatively. And what are these pervasive symptoms? There's disordered thinking, abnormal mood or feeling, abnormal behavior, abnormal perception, like you're seeing things or hearing things when they are not present, and more importantly, physical complaint like back pain, headaches, nausea, dizziness, all these palpitations, they can be part of the syndrome.
Okay. And another very common term that we hear nowadays is stress. So, what is stress?
Well, let me put it in a very simple formula for stress. Whenever there is any change in our life, it leads to stress. And when stress piles up, it leads to a disorder. So, stress can be defined as a physical or psychological stimulus that can produce mental tension or physiological reactions which may lead to illness, not necessarily all the time. And the external influence, the factors that produce stress, are called stressors. They may be actual stressors or perceived stress, and they produce an adverse or health threatening response in the body.
Okay.
So, mental stress affects all of us to a greater or lesser degree, just like physical stress. We have to learn how to cope with stress, how to cope with fear and anxiety in these exceptional situations, especially these difficult times during the pandemic. We need to safeguard our physical and mental health, both of ourselves and of our loved ones.
So, doctor, you were talking about stress. Now, how does stress piles up?
Well, very interesting question. Stress piles up exponentially. And by that I mean, let me give you an example. Since we are living in Canada, we are familiar with snow. Suppose during the winter, if I were not to clear the snow on my driveway, what would happen? After 3 months, the snow would keep piling up till it reaches the roof. So what is important is to clear the snow after each snowfall. That way you don't allow the snow to pile up. So stress can be compared to snow. If we do not manage stress on a day-to-day basis, we can have a pile-up of stress. And when the stress increases, it affects the body and the mind.
So, how does pandemic affect stress and anxiety?
Stress and anxiety and fear have increased in most of the people during the pandemic. And the reason why we have seen an increase is because there is sudden and rapid changes in our life, in our surroundings, in our family, in the society. There are changes in our lifestyle. No more parties, no more socialization. We feel socially isolated. Unemployment rate has gone up. The future appears uncertain. There is no proven treatment as yet, although there are lots of clinical trials going on and some medications have been found to be effective in many patients. Vaccine is there, but there are two things. There's a lot of people who don't want vaccine. At the same time, some developing countries do not have enough vaccine to give to the entire population. And most of all, there's an overload of information through media and social media.
So, how can we cope with stress and anxiety
Very
during the
good.
pandemic?
As I said, we have to remove the snow every day. So also we have to cope with the stress. Now, stress can be negative or stress can be positive too. Like there is a good stress and a bad stress. Over a period of our lifetime, we have learned through our intellect and through our feelings and emotions how to deal with obstacles, how to take up challenges, and how to use it to our advantage. Now, doing that, we have used stress and made it into a good stress so that in future we are able to fight the obstacles and overcome them with what we have learned throughout our lives. Coping with stress is important, but also important is how to build resiliency so that you can bounce back from a certain situation. So, for that, there are some tips which I can give. You establish a daily routine, eat nutritious and healthy foods. Sleep is very important. Get enough sleep every night. Exercise and stay physically active. Enjoy listening to music, reading good books. Avoid excessive television and excessive screen time. Social media should be limited as well, the time you spend on the iPhone or practicing simple breathing exercises, diaphragmatic breathing or alom vilom, that helps. Pranayam, alom vilom, yoga asanas, mindfulness meditation, all these help to relieve stress. And prayer has also a very important role to play because prayer gives you hope. Having a spiritual mindset builds compassion and empathy in your mind for others. So, most important is also one has to stay connected socially. Socially isolated doesn't mean you stop living on an island or you live in a very prison. You can connect with people through phone calls, through emails, FaceTime, Facebook. There are so many things. So, connectivity is important. Call your friend, call your neighbor, and most important is never give up hope and faith.
Yeah.
Right? So, conventional thinking suggests that stress is inherently bad and should always be avoided. No. This may sometimes be misguided, however. We have to use the stress to our advantage. Learn, for example, a student is going to an interview or exam and he starts sweating, he starts pacing up and down. All this is building up the stress. levels to a certain point where his performance is optimum or at the best level.
So, doctor, you just mentioned the importance of having a dialogue or talking to your loved ones. And we also talked a lot about the causes, effects, and factors which are responsible for stress during the pandemic. How important it is for parents or family members to have a conversation.
Well, what is important is spending time together. Whenever it's possible, even you can spend time at dinner, shut off all the phones and texting and talk. Or you can even have meeting once a week if everyone is busy over the work. But family meetings are the basis because family is the basic unit of a society. Family units make a community. Now, very often it's very important that we listen to people rather than we talk too much. So if somebody is no, I'll say. So it's important for parents especially to listen to their children and to their youth rather than throw advice on everything. This generation is different from the older generation. So I would say that, listening is very important than just throwing advice to the youth and the children because every generation is different. Society changes, the value system changes, even the social cultural norms change. So when parents listen to their children or their youth, they don't have the need to go to the peer group with their problems. When parents are just giving advice and not being able to actively listen to their children, the children and the youth tend to go and get advice from peer groups, and they are not mature enough or wise enough, I would say, to give the advice on certain issues.
So, thank you, Dr. Panjwani, for sharing your valuable insight with us. I'm sure a lot of parents and teachers and family members would benefit from the information that you have given us today.
Well, I must thank you for having the series of mental health topics for the general population. Sometimes there's a lot of stigma involved, and once we make people aware and educate them about mental health issues, then that stigma will automatically be eradicated eventually. Thank you.
Thank you.